Before we came around, there's never been a step-by-step instruction manual for cold calling. Now there is. Our step-by-step instruction manual is comprised of 5 parts. Each cold call script has 5 parts in a certain order. We teach you what those 5 parts are. We show you the order of those 5 parts, and we give you examples of those 5 parts, customized for your industry, for your organization, based on the services you want to provide.
Welcome to the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast. Let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, this is Augustino. For many new and experienced entrepreneurs, we sometimes hit plateaus on our way to our personal capital raising and our sales goals as well. It is at these points that we must really dig deep to push through these plateaus. And at times, it may even mean discovering talents that we never knew we had. Today's guest understands this concept, and he has a deep, deep understanding of how the cold call work. And he has mastered key cold call philosophies, as well as business development and client acquisition strategy. He is known as the cold call coach to many organizations because he is able to apply best practices to help companies take their outreach to the next level of success. He is the author of the best-selling book, The Secrets to Cold Call Success, and has taught thousands of students globally through his Cold Call University program, helping sales professionals in the range of industries to close more deals. Now, with all that, I'd like to welcome my good friend, Paul Newberger, to the show. Hey, Paul, thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely, brother. Wonderful to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. Now, if you like what Paul has to say, you can reach him through his website at paulmnewberger.com. And if you like our content, please don't forget to leave a comment and rate the show. And finally, if you text the word freedom to 202-410-4202, you get our free ebook, The Bulletproof Guide to Raising Capital. Okay, Paul, go ahead and tell listeners a little bit more about what you do and a little bit more about your background as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm one of those guys whose parents dropped him on his head a lot as a youth because I'm just drawn to things in life that are very, very hard. I just believe that if it ain't hard, it ain't worth doing. And if I'm going to get out of bed in the morning, I'm sure as heck not going to do it to master the stuff in life that are easy. I'm an international keynote speaker. And part of the reason I'm a keynote speaker is getting in front of thousands of people is hard. I love cold calling. Again, because cold calling successfully is very, very hard. I'm in the sales profession because, as you know better than most people, sales is very, very hard. One of the mottos that I have for my business is making the impossible possible, because it's only impossible until somebody does it for the very first time. And I own 4 different businesses, all of which try to show people just how you can go about making the impossible possible. I love entrepreneurship. I love growing things. I love creating. And I would say my favorite thing about being an entrepreneur and a business owner is I can make this whatever I want. Life is literally a blank slate. It's literally a blank page. I'm the author, and I can make it whatever I want it to be. And there's not too many professions that can claim that. So really enjoy building, really enjoy creating, and cold calling is certainly a part of that.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is that many people, some people don't realize that we are the product of what's around us. Well, sort of in a way that it's a manifestation of what we believe, right? The things around us. And if we choose to live in a certain area, live in a certain way, it's manifested with our own minds, and that level of difficulty or ease is also defined in that same way too, right? And sales by no means is easy, and cold calling is even less easy. So in our world, we're often trying to raise capital, we're trying to get more deals done, and a big part of it is sourcing deals. A big part of it is raising capital, and I'll tell you what, Paul, whenever there's that point where you're trying to raise a bit of capital, sometimes you have a warm lead. It's not always, it doesn't have to always be a cold lead, right? But I still have to imagine, though, getting things started, as far as getting that initial discussion going, is really, really hard, right? I mean, how does that begin? How do you open someone when you're first trying to make that initial call to try to at least get a meeting with them? Tell them a little bit about what you do and whatever it is that you're trying to sell. And in our case, we're trying to sell multifamily real estate in terms of raising capital, for instance. How would you sell that to someone? How would you set up that meeting?
Boy, how much time do we got? That's a good question. Well, I'll tell you, the one thing I just want to correct. So you say cold calling is really, really hard. Sure, if you're not a client of the cold call coach, because I don't think any of our clients over the past 6 years would say cold calling is hard. Before I answer your question, I just want to give you some statistical analysis here because I'm a good talker. I've been called a charismatic guy once in a while. So it's easy for somebody to get swept up in what somebody says, but let's look at the numbers. I appreciate you talking about my book, The Secrets to Cold Call Success, that was released about a month and a half ago. And yeah, it's been a blessing to call that a bestseller in a number of different categories. I did a number of pieces of research leading into that book, and I found that the nationwide cold call success rate is approximately 5.5%. That means that 5.5% of your conversations actually lead to appointments or dedicated time. Just imagine that for a minute. Could you imagine if your doctor got your diagnosis right 5.5% of the time? Could you imagine if your auto mechanic accurately fixed your car 5.5% of the time? These professionals would be in jail, they'd be disbarred, maybe allegations of fraud. In no other field would that even be close to being deemed acceptable. But we're supposed to live with that in cold calling. I don't think so. Our clients over the course of 6 years, now that's a big sample size. We've worked with about 12,500 clients over the course of 6 years. Their average cold call success is 36.4%. 36.4% over 6 years. That is a huge sample size. You look at voicemails, the nationwide voicemail response rate is 0.7%. Even worse, you got to leave about 110 voicemails just to get one returned. And even then, it was an accident. What do you mean? This isn't Domino's? Our clients, our clients have an average 23.1% voicemail response rate. How do we do it? Well, I charge a lot of money for that, but what I'll do is I'll give you some high level overviews here, which I think will start the conversation. What you got to do is rather than just diving into the script and diving into the formula and the structure, you got to take a step back and you got to talk about philosophy. What are you using this tool for? What are you using this modality for? What are you trying to achieve and how do you aspire to get there? And there's three things that we really believe in all of our training. And what's nice about this, real quick, as a quick aside, is this is very relevant to cold calling specifically, but this is also relevant to other sales modalities generally. If you can do this on the cold call, you can do this via email. If you can do this on the cold call, you can do this with a stop by appointment, a piece of direct mail, whatever the case may be. Those three philosophies, real quick, are this. Number one, we believe people buy people first, as opposed to buying companies, services, products, or professional value add first. So when we start a cold call, we start by selling ourselves first. Now, how do you do that? Somebody could say, well, hi, Agostino. My name is Paul Newberger. I like long walks on the beach. I'm a Sagittarius and tacos are my favorite. Well, no, of course you're not going to start off like that. That's restraining orderville. But what we do is we've got a unique methodology that shows you how to sell yourself. Because once they like you, once they trust you, once they're intrigued by you, now you've got the keys to the kingdom. But you got to stop leading with and selling your company and professional value first. That's number one. Number two, people are not logical buyers. People are emotional buyers. And in your field in particular, I guarantee you there's a lot of logic involved. There's numbers, there's investments, there's rate of returns, there's strategic plans. That's all fine. Logic plays a role, but rather than leading with logic, people use logic to basically justify an emotional purchase. So you got to sell on emotion. How do you make them feel? What kinds of emotions are you stirring up? Once you get them at an emotional level, now you're more likely to close the deal. So we teach you how to do that. And last but not least, you got to learn how to differentiate yourself. There's so many people that do what you do, so many companies that do what you do, so many entities that provide the products and services and value add that you do. How in a matter of seconds are you going to stand out? Wow, I've never got a call like this. Wow, I know 6 people in this field, but I'd never heard one quite like this. If you can focus on selling yourself first, hitting them at a deep emotive level and messaging it in a way that is unlike anything they've ever heard before, hello, 36.4% cold call success.
Nice. Interesting. So basically then it's kind of like figuring out what they want first, what their needs are, sounds like. But they're also buying, when they're buying that person, they're also buying their story as well. I mean, there's a little more to it than just, hi, my name is Augustino. I like long walks on the beach. I mean, there's there's more to it than that. It sounds to me like identifying their needs. How do you help them? And try to get to that in a very short amount of time. Then once you get them in the door, it sounds to me like it's also what is your story? Who am I buying this from? Right? Is that accurate?
It is accurate. And one of the things that we really emphasize with respect to our methodologies and our teaching is we don't cold call to sell anything. We cold call to give everything. And I think that's the difference. It's all about value. And for us, we define value is what can you give the prospect where they benefit first, above and beyond the services you're paid to provide. So I'll give you two quick examples. So I work with a large number of financial services clients. I created this methodology when I was a financial advisor with Thrivent Financial. So it's a really good fit in the financial services sector. One of the things that you could do as a financial advisor is you could call and you could say, hey, I might be able to offer you a complimentary financial review. Now, technically, that's a value offering. You don't have to pay for it. It's not going to cost you anything. I'm going to give it to you for free, and there's necessarily no obligation that we need to work together. However, you're a financial advisor offering a financial review. That still seems somewhat salesy. That's still what I call self-incriminatory. Yeah, free financial review. You're going to sit down with me. You're going to tell me about all the stuff I'm not doing, and then you're going to try to sell me something. What I try to challenge my clients to do is what can you offer that is independent of what you do? If you're in your line of work, can you offer a referral? If you're in your line of work, can you offer some kind of education, information? If you're in your line of work, can you offer some kind of exposure, marketing opportunity? Can you take them to an event? Can you plug them into your network? There's so many things that you can offer above and beyond the services that you're paid to provide, but very few people think of it that way. They just think of this is who I am. This is what I do. I'm trying to sell them on something. Therefore, I'm just going to talk about who I am professionally. Well, who you are personally also matters. Who you are personally can bring value. Who you are personally can touch lives and make the world a better place. And what we have to do is we have to try to find value add propositions, not based on what you do, but who you are.
That's right. And it's funny, Paul, because there's a good friend of mine. When I first met him, he knew that I did real estate. He works at a title company, very large title company. But the one thing that this guy is very well connected. And it isn't like he tried to say, let me earn your business by taking you out to a fancy steak dinner. He was more along the lines of, there's some people I want you to meet because I think they can help you build your business. Let me set up a meeting for you. And ever since that time, he's my title company. He's introduced me to so many people that have indeed changed my life, but he gets all my business and then some. And I refer him to other people, right? So it all started with going to an event and I met him and we got to know each other. And he led with value first.
Well, and I'm glad you said that because what you're talking about here are basically this transcends the phone. You can do this via email, you can do this via text message, you can do this via direct mail. Hell, you can do this via messenger pigeon, probably if you tried to. But you're talking about basic laws of human nature and human psychology, and I'm going to touch on three real quick. But you already set this up nicely. One, humans are driven by two things: self-interest and self-preservation. That doesn't mean we're narcissistic. That doesn't mean we're greedy. That doesn't mean we don't care about other people, but that's what drives us. I have to eat to live. Therefore, eating is an example of self-preservation. I need to go to work to get paid. Therefore, going to work is in my self-interest. What you need to do as a cold caller or as a salesperson is you need to tap into everybody's favorite radio station, WIFM. What's in it for me? And if you're just calling to sell something, that's what's in it for you as the salesperson. What's in it for me, the prospect? Giving something taps into WIFM. Offering something taps into WIFM. And what you're talking about, Augustino, already is beautiful because lastly, that brings us to the third part, which is the law of reciprocity. People, if they realize, man, being a friend of Augustino is good for me. Being associated with Augustino is good for me, not just because he provides a good service. He gives me referrals. He opens up doors. He's making me money just by knowing him. I want to keep that gravy train going. Gee, Augustino, what can I do for you? Once you get the prospect to say, what can I do for you? Hello, silver tuna. Now maybe I can talk about my products and services. Maybe I can ask them to reciprocate referrals. Maybe they can promote me on their social media platform, whatever. But people want to work with people they know, like, and trust. And once you check that box and you're offering value, when that law of reciprocity kicks in, that's when you really start going up a notch.
Now, how do you open that up though? That's the thing. I mean, I'll tell you what, on LinkedIn anyway, I get so many questions there. Oh, let's connect. I saw your profile, nice picture or whatever, right? I get all kinds of things like that. But I imagine that there's someone listening out there right now. They're looking to get into the real estate world. They want to start raising money, but it all starts with making those initial calls. And I'm not saying it, obviously, for whoever is listening, you have to make sure they're properly vetted out, accredited investors, all that are sophisticated, one of the two, depending on how you set up your syndication. But still, that initial phone call is always the toughest. How would you open up something like that? Like how would you do that? Would you go in with something like, if I'm tapping into WIFM, it'd be like, hi Paul, where are you with your real estate investments these days? Or like how would you open that up?
Yeah, so I'll tell you as much as I can without giving away my secret sauce. The
Sure.
reason I'm shaking my head as you're saying that is again, I think we're really, really good at the cold call coach of subscribing to the KISS method.
Yeah.
Keep it simple, stupid. And I think we've really kept it simple, stupid with respect to cold calling. So there's two things about our cold calls. Number one, we teach defensive cold calling, not offensive cold calling. Offensive cold calling is what you put in to the script. Defensive cold calling is what you take out of the script. Offensive cold calling is what you say. Defensive cold calling is what you don't say. Our scripts are extremely short because, again, just like a good defense beats a good offense in football, a good defense beats a good offense in cold calling. So our scripts are comprised of 5 parts. What I like about our script is we don't just go into each individual's place of employment or each organization and say, hey, based on who you are and what you do, say this, man. Yeah. No, we don't do that. What we do is if it's Christmas Eve, let's say, you've got your 3-year-old baby girl, she's asleep, you bought her a Minnie Mouse bike, because what baby girl doesn't want a Minnie Mouse bike? And you think, well, she's going to wake up the next morning. You got one of two options. You can wrap this big old box. She unwraps it, then what? Now she's going to be clamoring for you to put it together on the spot. Or you can put it together the night before and it's waiting under the tree. What if I'm going to put it together the night before? Again, I barely know the difference between a wrench and a screwdriver. I'm going to need to follow an instruction manual. That instruction manual is going to make me look like Bob Vila because it's just going to show me do this, do this, do this. That's it. Before we came around, there's never been a step-by-step instruction manual for cold calling. Now there is. Our step-by-step instruction manual is comprised of 5 parts. Each cold call script has 5 parts in a certain order. We teach you what those 5 parts are. We show you the order of those 5 parts, and we give you examples of those 5 parts, customized for your industry, for your organization, based on the services you want to provide. Our scripts are exactly 6 sentences long. No fewer, no more. It's exactly 6 sentences, and it takes us 20 to 25 seconds to execute our scripts. Anything less than 20, you're not putting enough in. Anything more than 25, you're starting to sound salesy and go into self-incriminationville where they think you're selling. So the first thing is you got to subscribe to those 3 models. Now, I'm being kind of vague, but that's the step-by-step approach. The other thing that we believe too, when it comes to cold calling, is in addition to those things, how we start walking through this process is very important. Nobody wants to get an unsolicited call from a salesperson. If you sound salesy, you're dead. Because, hey, unregistered call, I don't know this person. Hello, they're waiting for the shoe to drop. The minute you start talking about professional you, the services you provide, the products you offer, the value add that you give, your chances of success go down. So we don't want to be misleading, but we want to save a lot of that stuff for the end of the script. What normally goes in the end should go in the beginning, and what normally goes in the beginning should go in the end. Here's an example. If Agostino's cell phone rings, you pick up the phone and you hear something like this. Good afternoon, Agostino. My name is Paul Newberger, founder of the Cold Call Coach. Just wanted to see if you're happy with your current cold call success rate. Now, if I were to ask people, do they think that's a sales call or a non-sales call? I hear you chuckling over there, buddy. Most people are going to say, well, that's a sales call. Well, my question is, what did I say I was selling? And the answer is, I didn't say I was selling anything. I just said I wanted to see if you're happy with your success rate, but you assumed it was a sales call. Imagine instead if you got a greeting like this. Augustino, good afternoon. Paul Newberger, how you been?
Right.
All I'm doing is giving you, I'm greeting you in a manner that assumes familiarity. Most people are going to say, hi, Paul. How are you doing? In their head, they're thinking, who's Paul? Well, if in your head you're thinking, who's Paul? What are you not thinking? You're not thinking sales call. You're not thinking, I got to end this. You're not thinking, oh, crap, I shouldn't have picked up the phone. We have multiple parts of the script that do just that. How do you pique curiosity? How do you leave them wanting more? How do you buy yourself time, all in a manner that doesn't sound salesy? I gave you one of the 5 pieces. The other 4, I'm probably going to withhold, but that's the methodology. Rather than coming across as a salesperson, rather than leading with professional you, how do you say what you want to say anyway without coming across as a salesperson? And you kind of need somebody from time to time to help you navigate that.
Another part of it is your delivery as well. If you sound salesy just by certain inflections rather than, I guess, sounding a little more casual, does that usually set people off as well? Is that one of the five rules?
Well, it's not so sure. So when I talk about 5, I'm not talking about 5 rules. I'm talking about 5 parts. So step A is do this, step B is do this, step C is do this. I mean, our cold call methodology is idiot proof. I've seen some of the most introverted human beings that borderline hyperventilate when the phone rings have a 50% cold call success rate because we've given them a step-by-step formula. You're right, though. The tonality means a great deal of importance in the end of this thing. Part of the problem that I have is I sound too polished. I've got that radio voice. I also have a face for radio, by the way. I've got this radio voice. It's very smooth, not a whole lot of ums or uhs. That strikes people as a little, boy, what the heck? This just seems a little too slick. What you don't want, and initially you're going to need a written script for sure, because this is a new methodology. It's a new approach. You got to familiarize yourself with it. But we do this in such a way that we want to decrease your reliance on the script narrative. Because if you receive an unsolicited call from a person you never heard of, from an organization you're not familiar with, and it sounds like they're reading from a teleprompter, the only person it could possibly be is a sales call. Nobody else would call you in reading from a script. So we want to teach you how to decrease that script reliance. We want to teach you how to internalize this, just some various things that you can remember to make it a little bit more natural. But sure, don't sound like you're calling somebody to say you're going to break up with them. That doesn't give the right psychological vibe. Sound excited, sound happy, have that up cadence, have that low cadence, speed up a little bit, slow down a little bit. Just make it, the variety is the spice of life after all. And if you can kind of do all of that over the course of 20 to 25 seconds, that's exactly the right tone you want to set. And you're going to have a lot of success if you do that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and after you get past the opener, then at that point, you would, I'm not going to say you're going to pitch them, but I guess if you're just trying to get a meeting with them or get a follow-up call with them, it's getting through those first 20 seconds or even less than that, really, to really walk them down the line all the way to the end, right? And do you typically script out that whole thing, like to script out the whole scenario? Is that typically what you guys do?
Script out the whole thing, absolutely. But the thing about us though is I don't believe in give a man a fish, feed him for a day. I believe teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. And maybe that makes me a bad business owner where people should be dependent on me. You need a new script? Pay me. You have a question? Pay me. I don't know. Maybe I'd make more money if I did that. But I just believe that cold calling is alive and well. There's never been a better time to cold call than now, not just now in this period of this COVID disruption, now in general. I just got done working with the Wintrust organization down in Chicago, one of those large commercial banks. I worked with 36 of their commercial bankers. They went through my 6-week program, and then I went through this 3-week follow-up phase where they're making daily cold calls. 36 people over the course of 3 weeks had an average cold call success rate of 59.8 during a COVID disruption. Because again, it's human nature. It's what can I offer you? What can I give you? How can you benefit first, all in a way that is very defensive? How not to sound salesy? So yeah, I mean, eventually, sure, we want to meet, but what are we going to meet about? What are we going to talk about? People buy people first. They're not going to buy me sight unseen on the phone. I got to get a little bit of time with them. But in order to get that time, WIFM, what's in it for me? What can I offer you above and beyond the services I'm paid to provide? If you're a person like me that has a very large social media following, LinkedIn, maybe I can offer to promote you on my social media page. Maybe I can take you to a networking event. Maybe I've got referrals that I can send you. Maybe I've got a subscription to this database that gives me white papers or educational literature that most people don't have. Maybe I can offer some of that to you at absolutely no cost. It's just being creative in what you can give. And if you get in the habit of giving in a manner that is very quick, to the point, non-salesy, and you don't self-incriminate, your odds of success go up. And we'll help you navigate that entire process and make sure you have a customized script that works.
No, I guess with the giving component, totally agree, 100%. It's but what comes to mind though is that well, I'll give an example. Recently, I'll get these calls and emails and messages on LinkedIn with, here's this report on, I don't know, something, I don't know, something I'm totally not interested in, right? And it always comes in at 2 o'clock in the morning. So it seems like there's a lot of people that seem to be trolling my LinkedIn at 2 o'clock in the morning, sending me stuff I don't even want. But I think that's part of it, right? Is that if you're going to do this game, does that mean you should at least look into who that person is you're going to call beforehand, and then I guess tailor what you might think they might need before you send something to them? I mean, is that typically one of the things you have to do?
Sure. I mean, you got to know your audience. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up. I guess I just kind of assumed that was common sense for some people. But to your point, some people don't necessarily think of it that way. They're sending you these 2 a.m. LinkedIn messages after they just shut down their local bar, and now they're stumbling back, sending out random messages. So, yeah, you do have a lot of people that don't put a lot of thought into this. I'm glad you mentioned LinkedIn, though, because LinkedIn and cold calling are very harmonious. Some people think there's this animosity between these two. Do you do LinkedIn or do you cold call? For me, it's not an or proposition, it's an and proposition. I do both. And the information you can get on LinkedIn is absolutely extraordinary. So based on what people do for a living, based on what they're involved in, the organizations they're associated with, the posts that they like. That's the other thing. I mean, LinkedIn has this digital footprint where you can see every single post that people do. You can see every single post that they like. And if I'm scrolling through somebody's activity, I can say, man, Agostino really likes panda bears. He's liking every single panda bear post over the past 2 months. Now, might not call to necessarily say, hey, I got some panda pajamas to send your way, but at least I'm starting to put some stuff together saying, I see what you like. I see what you're interested in. But no, you absolutely have to know your audience. If you're calling individual investors, what do individual investors like? What do individual investors want? What would individual investors be excited about? If you're calling the VP of HR at an organization, what does the VP of HR like? What are these people accountable for? What taps into their self-interest and self-preservation? If you don't know your audience, you shouldn't be cold calling in the first place. So your ability, at least, maybe you interview people like them, people that are already in your natural market. What would get you going? What do you want to hear? Building a script around that, doing LinkedIn research, centers of influence, people that are around individuals like this. But you absolutely need to know what taps into their self-interest. Otherwise, you have no shot.
100%. I mean, identifying that demographic and understanding their needs and wants is 100% key. Is that something that you'd actually help on doing, like putting all that together, helping them define that, like, I guess, build that persona?
Yeah, one of the things that we do, so before, like we're talking about the scripting stuff, and I don't blame you because we have a limited amount of time. Everybody always wants to talk about the scripting. That's the sexy stuff. That's the glam stuff. But in our cold call training, like a group. So if I'm training an entire group of people, that's a 6-session program, 12 hours of total training. We don't get into scripting until the end of session 3. We have 5 hours of stuff before we even get into the script, because the war on cold calling is won or lost before you ever pick up the phone. We start with philosophy, people by people. If we're not in the right mind philosophically, I don't care what script I give you, you're dead. Then we go into psychology. People won't always remember what you said, but they'll never forget how they felt when you said it? How do we give people an experience? That's part of the reason you see me kind of jumping around here and getting excited. I'm trying to give you an experience, the listeners an experience. I want them to experience me, not just hear me. And then we get into the scripting. But one of the central things when we talk about the overall cold call strategy is identifying your ideal client, because you should really only be cold calling, at least initially, your ideal client. We define an ideal client as somebody, an individual or an organization, and you have to do it in 6 objective specific steps. So for instance, if I was calling a manufacturing organization, I know it's a little different than what we're talking about here today, but it's easy to make an example. Specific, objective, quantifiable criteria. You need all 3. Anybody needs to be able to see it if that organization was in front of them. For instance, the organization is family owned. Check. The organization has 1,000 employees. Check. The organization is located in Milwaukee. Check. The organization does $50 million in revenue. Check. It's a big company. It has a large number of employees. You've got to be very detailed and specific. You would do that with your investor. The investor would need to have a net worth of at least $25 million. The investor should be within 50 miles of my office. The investor should be between the ages of 35 and 60. Heck, I'm not trying to be sexist, but maybe male investors are better targets than female, or vice versa. Maybe these are investors that have 7 investments going versus somebody looking to make their very first investment. You got to get very strategic with who your ideal client is, because how are you going to build a very specific script if you're just scattershot? I'm calling anybody with a pulse. Well, good luck having a specific script when you're calling everybody. You can't build a script unless you do that work on the front end. We walk you through that. We hold your hand. We help guide you. If you're lost, we'll then provide you with some expertise to try to get over that hump. Once you do all of that work on the front end, now the scripting actually becomes easy.
It's funny. I think we're working our way backwards, because first you start talking about style, script, and identification of who you're targeting. But now, I guess another question is, how do you find it? How do you find that list? Do you actually just buy that list from like I think it's Info USA or something, or are you actually doing some lead gen or something like that?
Yeah. So again, the first thing that I would say is cold calling is not a numbers game. Crappy cold callers say cold calling is a numbers game. People that don't know what they're doing say it's a numbers game because they stink so bad they got to make 100 calls just to luckily stumble across 1 or 2. It's all about quality, not quantity. So when somebody says, I don't need a cold call coach, I make 200 calls a day. I go, woo, you need a cold call coach more than anybody. You must stink really bad if you've got to make 200 calls a day. What I try to do is teach quality over quantity. Let me just give you a really concrete example, because I used to be in the B2C side when I was a financial advisor with Thrivent Financial, and it took me a while. I wasn't making a lot of money for like a year and a half because I was in my late 20s, early 30s. And all I was doing, my natural market was people that were just getting married, people that were just getting going with a career, people that were making $40,000, $50,000 a year. All I was selling was a bunch of $100,000 30-year term policies. And I had enough commission to buy a pack of gum on the way home. I was killing myself. I was working very, very hard for no money. So I said, well, I'm always a hardworking guy, but how do I work smarter? So I started to figure out who needs me and when. The best thing you can do is identify what I call a life event. A life event is something that is happening in somebody's life where the urgency for your services go up. The urgency tension is there. They need to work with somebody like you fairly quickly. And I started to put the pieces together. This was my ideal client. This wasn't overnight, but it took a while. This was my ideal client. 6 specific objective criteria. 1, I was looking for a male because guys were more hands-off than the females. I wanted somebody to be hands-off. 2, they were between the ages of 45 and 60. They've accumulated wealth. They're in their peak earning years. And that time horizon for retirement is getting close. 3, my life event. They were right in the middle of a divorce. A divorce. That is one of the most, not only emotionally traumatic things you can go through, that is also one of the most financially traumatic things you can go through. And I wanted to be there for that. 4, they resided within 25 miles of my office. 5, when the divorce was done, they were going to get at least $1 million. And 6, they've changed their job at least twice in the last 25 years. Rollover opportunity, money in motion. To answer your question, how do you find that guy? Good question. because men going through a divorce aren't walking up and down the boulevard with a pink sign that says, "Hey, ladies, I'm about to be back on the market. Give me a call." How do you find these people? I had no good answer for that. It cost me sleep. There was a decent amount of indigestion as my stomach was turning, going, I got this great idea, but I can't find them. The answer to your question, I would say, is in addition to LinkedIn and kind of doing some search on where these people might come up, cold calling is a two-legged stool. Not only should you be cold calling your ideal clients, you should also be cold calling what I call COIs. COIs stand for Centers of Influence. These are individuals, organizations, or entities that are around your ideal client all day, every day. The best COIs make their living off of the life event that you chose. My life event was divorce. Gosh, can you think of some professions that make their money off of divorce? The obvious one is divorce attorneys. I know every single divorce attorney in southeastern Wisconsin because I've cold called all of them. You cold call them, you get to know them, you build the relationship, you offer them something of value, but then what do we start with? That law of reciprocity starts kicking in. So if I can't find my ideal client, if they're not really easily identifiable, if it's going to take me a while to find them, rather than just waiting, rather than spending all this money on lists, cold call individuals, organizations, or entities. In my case, divorce attorneys, realtors, CPAs, mental health professionals, counselors, whomever. These are all people that are around divorce individuals going through a divorce on a regular basis. Why work harder when you can work smarter? Sometimes your ideal client is going to be easy. Sometimes it's going to be challenging. But if it's challenging, call COIs, build relationships with them, and watch how the referrals come in as a result of that.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful. I mean, and to take it into the world of real estate and capital raising, who's a COI? A CPA. They're the ones that have all the money, right? So if, say, for instance, a real estate investor needs to sell off a big asset, and now they're going to be sitting on all this money, they got to put into another deal. Otherwise, they're going to get nailed by Uncle Sam, and they're going to have to pay all this crazy amount of taxes. But if you make a relationship with that CPA as a syndicator that has deal flow, maybe that investor, maybe they'll make an introduction, you get to know that investor, maybe they'll invest with you. I mean, this is all a networking game too. I mean, this is all networking. It's not just reaching out directly to an investor, it's also reaching out to those COIs, it sounds like to me.
Absolutely. What you just said is a perfect example. I mean, again, you just look at the math. If I call an investor, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I don't want your audience to think that I'm saying don't do that. You certainly should, but you've got to be very, very specific and detailed on who your ideal client is. And to your point, Agostino, where do I find this guy? So you're going to need to leverage that between the ideal client and COI. But if I'm calling an investor, I have to make one call to schedule one appointment to hopefully close one piece of business. 1-1-1. That's the ratio. But to your point, if I realize, wow, CPAs would be good people to be in front of because they're around these investors all the time. Certain life events on these investors, they're going to necessitate a conversation with the CPA. CPA could send me a lot of business moving forward. If you sell yourself, if you bring value, if you're your really authentic self and they really, really like you. I mean, you got to put in that work first. But if I call a CPA and really hit it off, now what's the math? One call to the CPA, one meeting with the CPA, I could get up to 100 pieces of business, if not more. What would you rather have, 1-1-1 or 1-1-100? This COI strategy works so well. I legitimately have some clients that don't even call ideal clients. That they don't, because they see it's easier to get in front of COIs. It's less threatening to get in front of COIs. The value proposition is a lot more obvious. It's easy to offer them value. It's easy to do nice things for them that makes them want to reciprocate. And once you have that relationship established, that can last you years, if not decades, and talk about long-term financial security if you're able to pull that off.
Yeah, and I mean, not to mention too, it's also easier to do things for a COI as well. Using a CPA example again, if I have someone who's looking for CPA services, hey Joe, or you just do your regular pitch. Joe CPA. I have a potential person looking for CPA services. I can connect you. Yada yada yada. The reciprocity kicks in, and next thing you know, well, maybe you start a relationship based on that. I mean, and I'm going through this very, very quickly. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more to cold calling than just making a simple phone call like that, just making an introduction on a whim. But it really takes a great deal of just getting out there and really establishing that book of business. And it sounds to me, though, by using the COI strategy and really doing those calls initially, it does take a high degree of work to build those relationships. I think that's probably the one component that many people underestimate, right? You may make 100 phone calls, but you're gonna have to manage a lot of relationships if you're successful in getting even 30% of those calls, right?
Well, sure, but I would say, I mean, that's life though. Life
Yeah,
is about relationships. I mean, if you're one of these individuals, I'm not saying you are, buddy, but if somebody's one of these individuals that's all about transactional selling, good luck. See you on the unemployment line, buddy, because that's not life. I mean, life is not
right.
transactional selling. I guess if I'm cold calling you to sell pens or widgets, that might be a little different. But if you're courting real estate investors, why the hell would I give you tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, to invest in real estate if I don't know you, like you, trust you? Of course, you have to build that relationship. Anything in life that is easy, I don't believe is worth doing. You have to earn that trust. You have to earn that respect. You have to earn that relationship. You have to earn that deep connection. But the thing is, if you're willing to put in that work up front, if you're able to do the heavy lifting up front, you likely have a client for life. Not
Yeah,
only do you have a client for life, but as they do one deal becomes three deals become 10. That one individual starts bringing their friends into you. I mean, again, people just have to look at it versus quality versus quantity. Oh my gosh, I got to run 5 appointments. I got to have 2-hour meetings with each person. Oh my gosh, this is immense. But man, in your line of work, in my line of work, all you need are a couple of really, really good advocates, a couple of really, really good clients, a couple of really, really big fish to land, and you could be set for life. If that's not worth a couple hours, if that's not worth a little bit of effort, I'd say you're in the wrong field.
that's right. No, 100%, 100%. And I think part of it too is like any craft, it takes time to, when you first start off with a script, get to practice your script and then eventually go off script. But it takes time to do that. But it also takes time to learn the lingo of real estate, learn the lingo of multifamily and syndication, and be able to speak that language as well. So there's a high degree of confidence has to be gained on the front end to open and to sell, to get that person to actually meet up with you at some point in the future, or even if it's a distance relationship, carry on a conversation normally over the phone or Zoom call or whatever. But then knowing the actual mechanics around deal flow and how it works and what the returns are and all that fun stuff to answer some of those very technical questions, especially if you're talking to a sophisticated investor, you better be armed and ready with all that information, because if you don't know it, you're gonna look foolish.
Yeah, no,
Right.
you're right. You're right. The one thing I would just say though is because people can get into their own heads a lot. And when I was a financial advisor, so I got into financial advising after the sudden passing of my father-in-law. He died from a fatal heart attack on his 60th birthday of all days. And um, boy, when you lose somebody that you love so unexpectedly, you just get these questions in your mind. You know, did he know how much I loved him? Did he know how much he meant to me? Did I hug him enough? Did I tell him I loved him enough? You know, those kinds of questions. And uh, you know, the emotional trauma of losing somebody you love is tough enough. What makes it worse is if there is an unnecessary financial trauma. And my mother-in-law's financial life is a little harder than it otherwise has to be because not all the pre-planning stuff had happened in advance. So that's why I became a financial advisor, because I didn't want that to happen to anybody else in my life. That's hard for me to live with as the son-in-law, thinking, what did I not do? What did I not say? How could I have prevented this? But when I became a financial advisor, I mean, I didn't know anything about finances. Annuity, I barely knew how to spell annuity. So I thought, oh my gosh, I'm at such a disadvantage. It's going to take me years to learn all this. It's going to take me years to memorize these prospectuses and mutual funds and everything else. But you know what I found? Within 2.5 years, I was the #1 life insurance salesman in my RFO, regional financial office. And there was a lot of people in my RFO. I had a popular one. And what I found was it wasn't because I was the most knowledgeable. To your point, you got to know something, that's for sure. But what I found is I would lead with my why a lot. I would lead with my story a lot. I would lead with my motivation for doing what I was doing a lot. And it was amazing how many people that won over. The other thing that I found is I got the benefit of the doubt more often than somebody else would. Paul's not as savvy with the annuity. That's okay. I like this guy. I trust this guy. Well, Paul doesn't know every little thing about whole life insurance. That's okay. He's got a good moral compass. He's in this for the right reason. We've really hit it off. Now, again, you still got to know enough. Maybe have a team around you to fill in some of those areas where you're deficient. Some of the smartest individuals at Thrivent when I was there, I mean, they could tell you everything about everything. I'd say about 20 to 30% of them when I was there didn't last because they didn't know how to sell. They didn't know how to prospect. They kept saying, well, I got to learn a little bit more, then I'll be more comfortable. Well, that was always a bridge too far. It was avoidance behavior. They never got out there. I agree with you, my friend. You certainly do need to know a lot, and you definitely need to know your thing. But I think if you sell yourself, you hit them at a deep emotive level, you tell your story, you really build rapport with these individuals, they're more likely to give you the benefit of the doubt and be a little bit more forgiving than if they didn't really know you and didn't have that relationship with you.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, you just did it here a bit ago too, when you explained the story about your father-in-law. It's a touching story, and you told it from the heart, but you also used very specific words and inflections to really capture the people listening. Right? It gets their attention. It gets
Yeah,
their
absolutely.
attention, and that
Absolutely. And,
yeah,
and one of the things that I had mentioned earlier, I know we're primarily talking about cold calling, which is fine. I absolutely adore cold calling. But my favorite thing to do in the entire world is to speak publicly. I've been very blessed. I'm an international keynote speaker now with COVID. I'm not doing as much as I used to do, but been in a bunch, foreign countries and everything else. And one of the things that I do, I love speaking for all the things that it allows me to do, but I hate speaking primarily because when I'm talking about psychological selling, I'm talking about instantaneous differentiation, how to be yourself memorable. I always open with that story, and I hate telling that story. I hated telling that story to you just now because it's never going to bring my father-in-law back. I
yeah.
miss him like crazy, and up until the point I started telling you about it, I wasn't thinking about him. Now I am, and now I feel kind of miserable, to be honest. But
Sorry.
but that's okay. I brought it up, man. It's not your fault. But you know the interesting thing though is I'll do a 2-hour keynote and I'll open with that story. The reason I open with that story is because at the end of my keynote I end on that story. And what I'll do is I'll say, "Hey guys, I told you in the beginning that I became a financial advisor. Why?" And they'll say, "Well, your father-in-law died." I'll say, "What did he die of?" "Heart attack." They'll say, "Well, what was unique about the day he died?" "It was his birthday." "How old was he?" 60. And I left out some of the details in this because but they're rattling off all the detail. All that was a 7-second anecdote that I did 2 hours ago, and I've covered all this information since. I've taken your mind all over the place, and then I've come back to it. In a room of 1,000 people can tell all the details like that, and it's a mic drop moment. The silence in the room is unbelievable because that is how you differentiate yourself. That is how you separate yourself, by having an emotional story that shows who you are as a person, that hits somebody at a deep level, makes you memorable, that also builds that authenticity as well. And if we can, in the cold call script is a wonderful place to start telling your why. That's an additional service that we provide. Simon Sinek gets all the credit in the world for his efforts in pioneering the why. But one of the things that he doesn't do very well, in my humble opinion, is he doesn't necessarily tell you how to find your why. And I would get that a lot. Well, Paul, and they didn't mean this in a bad way. It sounds bad. Well, Paul, you're lucky your father-in-law died. You got a why. I mean, they don't mean it that way, but they basically say, well, you're lucky you have a why. People say, I don't have a why. Well, of course you have a why, you knucklehead. Everybody does. So what I've done is I've developed a 6-step proprietary process on how to allow people to find and develop their why. Not just find it, not just develop it, but to articulate it on the phone, in person, via email, via text message, whatever the case may be. Because just about everything in sales revolves around the why, because people are buying you. And the number one best way to sell you is to lead with your why, however you want to deliver that.
Love it, love it. And then crafting that why up front, it has to be an initial part of your script, and it's got to be strong to captivate them. And I think that when people hear your why and it's a big enough why, they'll listen. They'll listen, especially when you hit them on that emotional level. It's we can't help it.
Well, and what that does, and again, I don't want to speak for you, but you already kind of alluded to this. I mean, we're buddies now. I don't mind saying that about you, and we've been chatting for however long we've been chatting. And as we were talking, I have no doubt you were forming an opinion of me. good or bad, probably use some 4-letter words in your head on your side to describe me. But once you tell that why, the perspective changes a little bit. It became why I didn't know that about him. Wow. Boy, I didn't know that was his motivate. Wow, that was really poor guy. Boy, it's tough to see him struggle with that. You tell your why, people's perceptions of you change instantaneously rather than, well, this is just a slick salesperson. Oh man, he became a financial advisor because he lost his father-in-law. I lost my dad. Boy, I can totally relate to the pain that he must be going through because I can relate to this guy because this guy's walked in my shoes because this guy's been where I'm now at. Therefore, I can trust this guy. That's the guy I want to work with. Just like that, you're selling yourself and you're really building some very powerful relationships.
Love it. Now, what would be that one piece of bulletproof advice you would give to someone listening right now who's kind of like on the fence about getting started, on the fence about reaching out and starting to build their real estate business and really get in front of investors and pick up the phone and take action? What would be the one bulletproof piece of advice?
You're good at what you do, man. You ask some very good questions, and I'm not normally speechless. What I would say, there's a lot that goes through my head, but I would say the number one thing is, because you've already kind of alluded to this, sales is tough. The world that you play in, the people you're trying to get in front of, that's tough. So what I would say, here's my advice. Most people let their standing determine their identity. What does that mean? So let's use an example. So for the world of sales, let's just say for 2 weeks, your cold calls are successful. Your conversations are going well. You're running a lot of appointments. You're getting in front of who you want when you want. You're getting these investors to start opening up their pocketbooks and their checkbooks. And you're saying, man, I've had a great 2 weeks. Look at this commission check. I don't have to go to Perkins tonight. Like, you're really excited about stuff. After those 2 weeks, your standing is pretty high as a salesperson, I would say. Well, if you let your standing determine your identity, if your standing is high after those 2 weeks, your identity is high after those 2 weeks. Man, I must be pretty good. Man, I was cut out for this. Man, I'm a natural born salesperson. But you know this as well as I do, Agostino, that sales is a fickle mistress. And for 2 weeks that you're up, for 6 weeks that you're down. Now you go those next 6 weeks. Nobody's returning your calls. You're getting yelled at on your cold calls. Newberger, I want my money back. The people that said they were going to meet are canceling on you. The deals you had lined up are all crumbling apart. For 6 weeks, now your standing is relatively low. You're not succeeding. You're not doing the things that you want. Well, if your standing is low and you let your standing determine your identity, now your identity is low. For 2 weeks, you're up. For 6 weeks, you're down. For 3 weeks, you're up. For 5 weeks, you're down. For 8 weeks, you're up. For 3 weeks, you're down. That is a roller coaster ride nobody wants to be on. So rather than letting your standing determine your identity, my number one piece of bulletproof advice is to flip it. Don't let your standing determine your identity. Let your identity determine your standing. So what you need to do, fellow listener, is you just need to answer the question, who are you? And what do you stand for? Now, your identity can be rooted in a bunch of different things. Agostino, I'm going to go for it. I didn't ask for your permission, but here goes anyway. I'm an unapologetic Christian. I don't think I'm better than anybody. I don't think everybody should subscribe to my beliefs. I'm not saying that, but I believe that I'm only where I'm at because of the blessings that God has so richly bestowed upon me. My identity is in being a son of God. That's my identity. Some people that aren't believers have their identity in something else, and that's totally fine. But in my life, if I believe that God loves me, that's my identity. For 2 weeks, I don't sell. Does that change God's love for me? No. So if my identity is still high, my standing is still high. Let's say, God forbid, my kids get sick, my wife leaves me, I get in a car accident. That's all unfortunate, but does that change God's love for me? No. So if my identity is still high, my standing is still high. You need to know who you are and what you stand for and plague that flag so deep in the ground that no wind, no air, no water, no forces of this world are ever going to shift it. Because this life is going to beat the crap out of you. This life is going to tell you you're worthless. You're not pretty enough. You're not handsome enough. You don't make enough money. Your car isn't good enough. Your checking account isn't fat enough. That you're never good enough for this world. So you have to be good enough for you, but you have to figure out what that identity is. Once you know your identity, your standing will always be high because your identity will never change.
Excellent. Excellent. Good stuff. Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, guys, if you want to reach out to Paul, you can reach him through his website at paulmnewberger.com. Go ahead and check it out. He's got a lot of great material out there. Definitely take a look at his book as well. If you are into cold calling or struggling with how to even set it up, pick up his book, take a look at it. I think it might be a good first step to really helping you craft your message and really get out there and hopefully set up some new conversations with some investors. All right. I hope you're able to see the value that cold calling success can bring to your life. And really, it's all about creating value and putting the audience first. That's really what it's about. All right. So go ahead and take care of yourselves out there, guys. And I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast.